Okay, today's lesson is all about argument writing, and it's all about actually reading argument writing. You're not going to write any arguments today, but you're going to read some. So, the learning target today is I can trace and evaluate an argument. Let's take a look at these two verbs for a second so you understand what exactly you're expected to do. Trace means that you can follow. So when you're reading a text, in a nonfiction text, and it's an argument, and we'll talk in a little bit what that means, you're able to follow the argument through the whole text. You're able to follow the reasons and follow the evidence so that by the end of the text you have followed, you've traced it or followed it all the way through. Evaluate means to judge whether it's a good argument or a bad argument. If it's well written or if it's not well written. So today we're going to focus on both of those skills, tracing an argument and how to evaluate an argument. So before we get started, just to make sure that you are with me, if you are doing this digitally from home, you should have a copy of these Cornell notes pulled up, maybe split screen with this Edpuzzle, and you're going to be typing directly in these notes. If you are working in the classroom, you most likely have a paper copy of these notes, so you're just going to need a pencil to write in the key details in your notes as we go along. Okay? All right, let's head back to the slides. So the first section of your notes is, what is argument writing? Well, I want you to think about what lawyers do in the courtroom, okay? Everyone's probably seen movies or television shows, videos. Maybe you've even actually been in a courtroom and you've seen an attorney work. Attorneys, when they are presenting their case, they're presenting argument. What that means is they have an opinion and they're trying to convince the judge and jury to agree with them by using evidence and reasons to support their opinion. They're trying to prove their opinion is true. And that's all argument writing is. It's where you're trying to prove something true. You have an opinion, but you have to back it up with reasons and evidence. So that's the difference between an opinion and an argument. Is an opinion is just what you think, but an argument is what you think but backed up. So in your notes, you're going to include when an author expresses a point of view, and you can put opinion also if that helps you remember what that means, and supports that view with reasons and evidence. Those are very important. That's what makes it an argument. Okay, so let's begin with the claim. Now, the claim is really the main point. Let's say my claim is all students should have to wear uniforms in middle school. Now, you probably don't agree with that. That's fine. I don't necessarily agree with it either, but that's my claim. That's my opinion, and I'm going to prove it to be true by listing reasons why it would be good for students and evidence proving why it would be good. So your claim is your main point. Okay. Sometimes we call this our thesis sentence. And if you remember when we wrote the TDA a couple months ago, you all wrote a thesis sentence about the novel that you read, and you proved your thesis true by going into the book and having reasons and evidence. That's argument writing. Your claim is a statement that the author believes to be true. And finally, the claim is an opinion based on the author's knowledge and research. Research is important. Going back to a text is like research. So speaking of going back to a text, let's think back to yesterday's article about pet adoption and think about the claim, the main point that article made. And if you want to think about it like the central idea, that also can help you determine the claim. So it's all about adopting pets, but really the claim is that pet adoption is better than buying pets from like a pet store or a breeder. So write this as your example claim in your notes. It is better to adopt pets than to buy them. That's an opinion, but it actually is going to be the claim of that particular article because there's a lot of evidence to back that up and reasons. All right. The next thing you're supposed to do on your notes is I want you to think of an image, and it can be an organizer, it can be a sketch, a little cartoon, something to help you remember what a claim is. Okay, remember a claim is the main point of an argument. And I want you to pause the video, sketch that out. It's just kind of a little visual for yourself. Double check, make sure you have everything in your notes for this section, and then when you're ready, we'll move on to the next section. Okay, this next section is all about the reasons. Okay, so you have an opinion, which is your claim. Well, you have to have reasons for your opinion. You can't just have an opinion. It won't be an argument without reasons. So reasons help support an author's claim. You want to add support into your notes. Good arguments have, I say, Ms. Bullard says, at least 3 different reasons as support. If you only have one reason to support your claim, it's not going to make a very strong argument. But if you have 3 is kind of the magic number when you're writing anything. 3 reasons will really make your claim strong, make your argument strong. So that's the magic number. And I'm going to give you 3 examples on the screen, but you only need to write down I think you only need to write down 2, or maybe you do. I'm sorry, you do have to write down all 3 in your notes. So thinking back to yesterday's article, remember the claim was it's better to adopt than shop, right? That was the title of the article. Well, the article listed 3 strong reasons to support that claim. The first one is pets that are adopted are actually healthier. And the article, remember, goes into all the information on the puppy mills and how the poor living conditions make those buying pets from breeders and pet stores. Sometimes they're not very healthy. But when they're adopted, they're healthier. So that's a good reason to adopt. Another good reason, according to the article, was that it's less expensive to adopt than buy pets. And the article goes into how much money it costs and to adopt versus buying pets. And a third reason that the article mentioned to support the claim is that adoption helps save the lives of pets in shelters. And I think we read in the introduction that 3.3 million dogs are put in shelters every year. So adopting pets will help save their lives. So make sure that you have all 3 reasons in your notes. And then I want you to draw something that represents the idea of reasons in your notes. Again, it can be a little sketch. It can be like a little organizer, something that's going to help you remember a visual of what a reason is and what it does in an argument. Pause the video and then come back for the evidence section. All right, the third part of an argument. First, we have the claim, which is the opinion. Then we have the reasons which support that opinion. Now we have the evidence, and the evidence is what supports the reason. So it's everything's being supported. It's like building a house, and one thing supports the other. So in your notes, evidence helps support an author's reasons. And good arguments have evidence such as facts, examples, statistics, which has to do with numbers, quotes, and expert opinions. And notice it says expert opinions. It's not just an opinion of someone, it's an expert, like maybe a doctor, a professional, somebody who knows all about the subject. And remember, when attorneys are in the courtroom, they'll bring people in to be to share their opinions, but they're always called expert witnesses, and that makes them very reliable, and you can trust the information that they share. So expert opinions will help an argument be very strong. So in yesterday's article, there was some evidence. I'm going to list 3 examples, but you only have to write down 2. So you choose which 2 to include in your notes as examples. I took the quote, "Unfortunately, some online breeders and pet shops get their dogs from puppy mills." Okay, that's a fact. And remember, that's supporting the fact that it's probably safer to just adopt rather than buy from an online breeder, because nobody wants to buy a puppy from a puppy mill because of the way they're treated and how unhealthy they are. So that was a good piece of evidence to support the reason and claim. Another piece of evidence from the article: rescue dogs are much less expensive than pet stores. Typical prices range from $50 to $250. So there we have a fact and a statistic, how the price is much, much lower if you adopt compared to buying from a pet store or a breeder, which is another piece of evidence that supports one of the reasons. And then one more piece of evidence, another statistic and a fact: approximately 3.3 million dogs are brought to animal shelters each year, and that supports the reason that we should adopt to help save the lives of these dogs that are in the shelters and may possibly be euthanized. So make sure you have at least 2 pieces of evidence as examples, and your blanks are filled in with the key terminology. And I want you to draw one more little sketch that is a nice visual for what evidence means and how it's used in an argument. Pause the video, make sure you have everything, and then we'll move on to a little summary slide. All right, so in summary, this is everything we've just talked about. It's good just to see it all together. You have 3 parts to an argument, okay? What does the author think? Well, that was going to be the claim. That's what the author thinks. That's the opinion. Why does the author think this? Well, those are going to be your reasons, the reasons why you have an opinion. And then the evidence is, how does the author support his or her thinking? Those are your facts, statistics, examples, expert opinions. So those are the 3 parts of an argument in order, from the big main idea to the supporting reasons, all the way down to the pieces of evidence that support everything. All right, now that you know the parts of an argument, let's talk about what makes an argument really good and what makes it not so good, and how to evaluate an argument. Evaluate just means to judge it based on how good it is, okay? Before I go into what to think about when you're evaluating an argument, I want you to remember, just because you don't like the argument, you don't agree with it, for example, having a dress code in middle school, just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not a well-written argument. I just want you to remember, sometimes 6th graders will get confused and they'll think, oh, that's a stupid idea. I don't agree with it. That's not a good argument. Well, when in fact it was a good argument, it had good reasons, it had good evidence, it was unbiased, it was reliable. So just be careful. Sometimes you might not agree, but that doesn't make it a bad argument, okay? So when I'm reading argument, I like to remember felt, F-E-L-T. Felt, if you don't know this, it's a material. It's fuzzy. Sometimes you see it like on toys. You can make crafts out of it, but it's a material that every how did I want to say this? It's a fabric. So it's the fabric of a good argument. It's what holds it all together. Felt, fairness, evidence, logical, and tone. So let's go through each one of these and I'll tell you what I mean by this. So F means fairness. You're going to write that in your notes. And I want you to ask yourself, is this argument fair? Okay. Is it balanced or is it biased? Bias is an important word. Bias means that the argument only tells one side. It only gives you information and statistics. It only addresses one side of an argument. If it's balanced, it actually is a stronger argument if it addresses the opposite viewpoint and explains why that opinion is incorrect. If it doesn't address the other side, it only talks about one side of an argument, we call that biased, and that makes it a weaker argument. So it's much better to be balanced than biased. You want to address both sides of an issue. So you have to ask, is it fair? Evidence. First of all, does it have evidence? Is it reliable? Is it factual? Are there expert opinions, or are they just random people? Is it current, up to date? That means whether it's relevant. If you're having an argument about, let's say, technology, and if you're using evidence back from the 1980s, that's probably not the most relevant evidence. We want to have very current evidence. So make sure it's reliable and relevant. The L means logical. Is the claim a logical result of the evidence? So is this opinion that this person has, does it make sense based on the evidence that they have? Or does it just, if it doesn't make any sense at all, that's not logical and it's probably not a good argument. And then the T represents tone. Is the tone appropriate? Remember, tone is the author's perspective or the author's attitude towards the subject that he or she is discussing. If it's too emotional, if it kind of gets sarcastic, or if it's silly, those are all inappropriate tones. You really want a serious tone when you're making an argument. Imagine that attorney in the courtroom and he's talking to the judge. If he gets silly or if he gets very sarcastic with a judge, that certainly is not going to help his argument. And it's the same in any argument that you're reading. So if you're looking at an argument and trying to decide whether it's strong or weak, you want to remember felt. Is it fair? Is the evidence reliable and relevant? Is the claim logical based on the evidence? And is the tone serious? Is it appropriate? And if you can check all those boxes, then you know it is a strong argument. All right, we're going to practice now. Today you're going to be reading a debate, actually, and the subject is video games and whether they should be a sport or not. I don't know if you know this, but there are colleges, over 100 of them currently, that have e-games as a part of their sports program. And kids can get scholarships by playing video games and compete for those schools, and it's growing every year. And in fact, I find this interesting. My son was just in a tournament this weekend for a college, and the top prize was a $15,000 scholarship. He didn't win, but it was good experience, and he's going to be entering some more. So I have a personal experience with this idea of video games and sports. So some people think, yeah, it should be a sport. There's a lot of training that goes in and skill required. And some people say, no, that's not really a sport. So you're going to read this article from Scope Magazine. If you are reading from home, there is a link I'm going to give you to Scope, and it's going to take you to this article online. You remember, you might have to log in using Google Classroom, and you're going to read the article right here. You can use the text-to-speech if you want to. And this is a little introduction. The first part is, yes, it should be a sport. And then down here at the bottom, this side of the argument says, no, it shouldn't be a sport. If you are in the classroom, you're going to have a copy of the Scope magazine, and you're just going to find it in the magazine and read it directly from there. And then you're going to come back to your notes, and you're going to finish your notes right down here. And you're going to write down the reasons for the argument that says, yes, it should be a sport, and some evidence. And then you're going to write a reason for, based on the article, no, they should not be a sport, and the evidence presented there. And then finally, what do you think? Based on what you read, do you think video games should or should not be considered a sport? You're going to write your opinion right here. I want you to give me one reason that supports your opinion and one piece of evidence, one piece of evidence that supports your reason. And when you are finished with this, if you are working from home, you're going to turn this in digitally to me. If you are in the classroom, you're going to raise your hand and I'll come by and collect this from you, and we'll move on to the next part of our assignment. All right, make sure you have all of your notes filled out. If you need to rewind this video, if you missed anything, make sure you go back and fill in any blanks that you have. And we are done with practicing tracing and evaluating arguments.